Welcome to Agronomy Moment. I'm your host, Wendell Cohen. We bring in people who agree with me, disagree with me, and above all, are not afraid to say it like it is. Our goal here is to challenge what we think, understand the why behind agronomical advice, and most of all, eliminate the noise in the room that are distractions so we can focus on the information that is relevant to your situation. A moment called now. All living things need the here and now. Crops won't grow with rain next month, sunshine this fall, or the right nutrient applied next year. Decisions to protect the life of living things require us as parents, leaders, and farmers to make decisions for the moment and in the moment. This makes farming fast-paced with limited information to act upon. This podcast is about farmers making decisions in the moment for end results that last not only a month, a season, or year, but a lifetime. Ultimately, even your children's future. Your crop needs a decision in the moment. Your farm needs a decision in the moment. And that's where we come in. Come for the agronomy and stay for the fun. Let's make decisions that increase your potential. Are you needing the paper?
I'll do it over here because we did the doodle.
Yeah, you do.
Doodle, Celena's pontificating.
I'm going to sit back and enjoy the rest of the show. All right, guys, biologicals. Let's talk about this. What's working?
All right, so we're going to kind of dig into biologicals a little bit. You know, there's many companies out there now. You know, we get tons of questions on biologicals, but that's due to how many companies are out there right now producing different biological products. Yep. You know, and so when I think about biologicals, to me, we're right at the tip of the iceberg on these products. And I like to reference soybean seed treatments from 15, 20 years ago. I mean, we were putting a little bit of fungicide, a little bit of insecticide on there and seeing some results. But look where we are today, where we have many different modes of action included in our treatments. And so I like to think that right now with biologicals, we're about where we were 15, 20 years ago with seed treatment. And we're going to figure them out one of these days. And they're going to be one of the next most impactful components of crop production for us. Yeah. Because some of them are amazing what they can do.
So what you're saying is it's not an element necessarily that we're always seeing it paying off yet, but it's not an element we ignore.
We talked about variability and everything we had this year. There's always variability in biologicals and how they perform as well. And so we've tested quite a few products, but I think one of the most important things to start with is just to get a little bit of a discussion of the difference between some of the products. And so when you think about the biological realm, there's two subcategories. You got the true beneficial microbes, the actual living critters out there, and then you'll have the biostimulants. Okay. And so, you know, within our soil, we have a lot of critters living there anyway that can have both positive and negative impacts on our crop. Yep. We're trying to add beneficials into that zone, into an environment that's already loaded up. But that's the goal, is adding more beneficials into the crop zone to help maybe fix atmospheric nitrogen for corn or whatever the case may be. But then you also have the biostimulants. And to me, the goal of the biostimulants is more to drive activities of the living things in the soil. So you're adding things to stimulate the activity of that living component of our soil to help our crop. And so when you look at some of the options we have for the beneficial microbes, you're looking at infixers, you got phosphorus solubilizers, mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza can be a huge thing following a fallow year. If we've had a flood year where you couldn't plant a crop, potentially adding a mycorrhizal fungi into the root zone or soil zone or a seed zone can really help us out. And then you have your decomposers and rhizosphere stimulators, things like that are living things that we've added. Then the biostimulants, you have enzymes. You know, you hear a lot of talk about humics and fulvics, marine extracts, and then just plain up sugars. You know, add a little sugar into that crop zone to drive biological activity. So we'll dig into. And
just to stop you right there, I want to just ask. So, what basically we're doing is we're separating the biological has become a buzzword in the ag industry. Right. And so what we're doing is we're separating this up here and say, hey, hang on a bit. Biologicals is your live microbes that you're adding to the soil. You're actually adding live things. And the stimulants are more like
microbes. Let's call it microbes living, because biologicals is kind of the overarching so biological components. And then within that, you have your living microbes as well as your biostimulants.
And biostimulants is just kind of like your food and your things that help them give them more energy and make them more healthy so they do more.
So, for example, like enzymes, one of the things some of those may do is help break down some materials that allow the microbes to feed. Or you'd have phosphatases that might be helping make the locked up phosphorus more available for the plants, which in turn makes the plants more vigorous, more healthy, driving and stimulating them.
It's two different ways of doing the same
Something
thing.
similar, exactly.
Okay, absolutely.
Yep, exactly. So how do they work? When you look at some of the living things, the microbes we're adding, they may form a symbiotic relationship with the plant. And so in that regard, the microbe is helping deliver nutrients to the plant while the plant is delivering food, more or less, to the microbes. So that's where the symbiotic relationship comes into effect. So you have products like, some of the big ones we hear about are the Pivot BioProven 40. Nutricia N was a big one coming out of Corteva. Some of the ones that we have PFR proven would be the Micro AZ in furrow, the Vertex in furrow, and the SB 4400 from a few years ago. Those were all PFR proven living critters that we were putting in with our crop. And then some of the others are, like we said earlier, designed to enhance nutrient uptake, whether that's through making the nutrients more available or driving the plants to be stimulated to grow more vigorously, allowing them to uptake more fertility. So that's kind of your two main ways of how a lot of the biologicals work within our crop fields. So we're going to start with some of our PFR studies here, looking at dry planter products. You have two components within this. You have talc replacements, and then you just have additives that you can add to your planter box with your talcs. So the first things we're going to dive into are just the planter box additives. These are not talc replacements. These are just things that we can add. You can see our control in this particular study was the 2 ounces per unit of seed of 80-20 talc graphite blend.
Yes.
And so on top of that, in the next 3 treatments, we added these like Micro AZ ST, the Rutella F, and the BioLevel Maize MP to our standard talc graphite combination. And basically what we're looking at with Micro AZ is it's a biological product. It's got a nitrogen fixer, azospirillum, I believe, is a component of that. And then you have Rutella F. Rutella is a mycorrhizal fungi. Okay. And then when you get to the BioLevel Maize MP, again, a biological with some nutrient added products involved in there as well. And what you can see is in our study, we had a yield increase in most of our treatments, all of them actually, and some of them not very significant, but we didn't see a lot of ROI gain for most of those treatments. However, we did with the Micro AZ ST. So like I said earlier, we had the Micro AZ IF, we had the in-furrow version we called PFR proven a few years ago, and we're seeing some positives in the first year of study with the Micro AZ ST dry in this year. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans out with another couple of years of PFR studies. The Rutella F, to me, if I was to think about how that would work, most of the time our soils are loaded up with mycorrhizal fungi from the previous crop, So to me, for us to be able to see a benefit from the Rutella, we're asking it to me quite a bit of that in a year where we probably already have quite a bit when we're crop following a crop. Now, if we were to do a crop following a fallow, or if we had a flooded out field where you needed to try to boost that mycorrhizal activity, to me, that would be an option to maybe use in your fields where you need to help boost that. So we may see more positive returns in a year like that.
The Rutella reminds me of Nutella, only it's a potato paste that you put on your bread or something.
It's not potato, isn't it? Hazelnut?
Hazelnut chocolate
spread.
Yeah,
but that's the Nutella. This is the Rutella.
Oh, gotcha.
Anyway, sorry.
I always got to throw stuff in there to throw me off. So anyway, like I said, we're looking at 1 year, and these are kind of interesting for us, and I think if you can fine tune how to use things, especially like Rutella, I'm about almost said Nutella, use Rutella, you might be able to see some advantages from something like that.
So is these products, though, the reason comparing to the talc graphite blend is just because that's what's typically done?
Yeah,
so
we all do that.
Now, are they adding
things?
Yeah, so you're doing control plus something else and just adds it doesn't take its place. Got it.
Right. This is not replacing talc graphite in this particular study. The next ones will show you ones that do.
Gotcha.
So this is the talc replacement study. So instead of using that 2 ounces, which was our control of the 80-20 blend, we're replacing that with these treatments now. So for example, the Grow Pack, Seed Plus Graphite, Stride Bio, all of those are a graphite talc replacer that also include basically some biostimulants and some nutritional factors that help drive root growth and plant growth. You look at the bottom one, the Revline Hopper Throttle Corn, it has some of those components, but also has a biological component in it, which is the Terrasym 450. Terrasym 450 was PFR proven last year for us and showed some very positive results. And Terrasym 450 can only be purchased in 3 different packages now, pre-mixed with, in this case, with a talc graphite replacement. And this is one of our options to buy Terrasym 450s in this Revline Hopper Throttle Corn. You can see in this case, all of these treatments did show a fairly reasonable increase in yield, and they're all showing a fairly significant increase in ROI. We see the lower ROI occurring with the Revline hopper throttle, but that's a little bit pricier product, while it's due to the fact it's containing a biological microbe in that mix.
And so are some of these that contain an actual microbe in them, does that require a special handling?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah.
When you see the package, we don't have the picture in this slide deck. There's a tub that contains your talc graphite products, and then there's buttons on top of the container that you push that adds the other remaining biological components into that. You mix that up, and then it's ready to go.
So you don't hit the air prematurely and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you don't want to, I guess I would say, put them into the environment that can reduce their numbers to the point where they're ineffective.
Gotcha.
And so it's a really neat package system from for that product.
Is that Meristem?
I believe that is Meristem. So again, looking at the numbers, very positive for these products. What I think is an interesting way to look at this, we think about ear initiation in corn. Basically begins from when we plant and then is up through pollination. But one of the key components that rows around is earlier in that growing season. So basically from the time we plant till we get to say V5, V6-ish time frame, that's when kernel rows are established. So you take a look at this. The treatment on the right is our control, which is just a 80-20 talc graphite blend. And then you see those products we mentioned. And in every case, we increase the kernel rows around versus the control that early in the season by just putting a little something in with that talc graphite. So I think that's interesting to look at the impact of biological, whether it's a stimulant or an actual microbe, can have on ear initiation that early in the season. And that's where those yields and those positive ROIs are coming from, is those extra rows around. And that's occurring so early in the season. That's very amazing to me.
That is interesting. There's a direct correlation to the rows around in those ear.
Exactly. We don't see a huge difference in length, which is occurring all the way up through pollination, but that row around is where we're seeing our impact from these.
You're actually increasing your potential right from the start.
Yep. So 3 years of study of talc replacements, we've been able to give GrowPack and Seed Plus graphite a PFR proven stamp, because we've evaluated them and their ROI and yields have been positive over those 3 years, and they're showing very strong potential for us. This is shifting gears. I had to look at the slide a second, see what we were covering here. This is taking a look at a talc replacement study in soybean. Previous studies we've been looking at have been corn. In this case, we're looking at soybean. And in this case, we saw a fairly significant improvement in ROI from all of our treatments. We saw yield improvement in all of them, but to me, it's pretty interesting to look at just adding a little something that we're already doing, maybe with a potentially slight higher increase in cost, but seeing a fairly significant boost in yield and ROI, even in soybean with these products. So you see here, the Stride Bio product did a great job of boosting. Some of these products, like the GrowPack and the Stride Bio, I believe, if I remember right, those have rhizobium added into them as well, to help drive infection of the roots for rhizobium for nodulation. Don't quote me on that, anybody listening to this, but if I remember correctly, those 3 products have rhizobium. Stride Bio may not have, but I know the Revline hopper throttle soybean, and I believe the GrowPack did include rhizobium strains in their mix.
Interesting.
Taking a look at some of the 3-year data from the GrowPack for ROI. Again, 3 years of positive ROI and positive yield allowed us to call that product PFR proven in soybean.
And back to the point that we made on an earlier podcast regarding weather, it's interesting to see 2021, 22, and 23, and we know the last 2 years have been a little warmer, a little drier overall. And I thought that's a cool illustration here.
We know we've had variable weather across the U.S. where we're doing in our footprint, our studies, and seeing consistently positive results from products like this. And it's going to be interesting. We're going to start looking at percent wins as a component of our PFR proven here in the next year or so. So we're going to try to fine tune. We may have a whole group of PFR proven, but we're going to try to cut that up into the ones that have shown the most bang for the buck in terms of positive ROIs and percent wins. So we can try to help out fine tuning some of our results here in the future.
I think that'd be really good.
So moving along, we're going to shift gears here to Pivot Bio Proven. This is always a big topic, no matter where we go. A lot of marketing going on with Pivot Bio. I think Pivot Bio's concept and the goal that we have with that is amazing. It's going to be something that we really will see great benefits from in the future. So we want to make sure we spend a little bit of time. We've evaluated Pivot Bio in the past. They're back in PFR in 2023. And so we have some 2023 results here. But I think it's important to kind of take a couple seconds to look at what Pivot is designed to do. It's to help reduce utilization of nitrogen. So in this case, we're talking about a 40-pound reduction in N. Replace that with the Pivot Proven 40 product, and your goal would be to still see equal to better performance and stabilizing performance in the field in regards to nitrogen uptake into the plants. So I think it's a really cool product to take a look at. When you look at handling, this is the kind of the protocol we use for handling the product, because again, this is a living thing. These are living bacteria that we're adding into the root zone, the seed zone of our crop. We have to make sure we're taking good care of these products to maintain the account of the critters that we're putting in there so that they can do their jobs. So storage is critical. It has to be stored between 32 and 70 degrees out of direct sunlight. Mixing, it's the last thing to go into the tank when you're mixing for your planter. And another requirement is that there's 2 bladders, and you have to equally mix them and make sure that you're using them within 24 hours of opening, and 1 box of the product will treat 40 acres. That's the protocol we used for our study to ensure maximum population of those bacteria when we conducted the studies. Another thing to take a look at is when we made our nitrogen reductions, we have our standard practices. You see in a corn soybean rotation, that's 60 pounds of N applied 2 by 2 by 2, and then the balance of our 190 pounds for the corn soybean rotation coming in at V3 as a side dress. Okay. In corn, on corn or continuous corn, again, we do 60 pounds, 2 by 2 by 2, but we follow that with 155 pounds of N at V3 in the corn on corn situation. In our study, we used a nitrogen cost of 70 pounds of N, 70 cents per pound for the N. And then when we did make the reductions for the pivot studies, those reductions occurred at the side dress time frame. We didn't reduce the at planting nitrogen. We used 60 pounds, 2 by 2 by 2, 30 on each side. In every one of our studies, but if we reduce by 20 or 40, which you'll see in our charts, we've made those reductions at V3. So one of the main goals with Pivot is to increase the amount of nitrogen in our plants. And so on a per acre basis, we measure the amount of nitrogen stored within plants per the protocol that they gave us for conducting this study. And what you'll see there is our control full rate of N. We wound up with around 54.9 pounds of nitrogen per acre stored within the plants on the left. When we reduced our nitrogen rate by 20 pounds, we were roughly the same amount of stored nitrogen within the plants. However, when we did the minus 20 plus the Pivot Bioproven N, proven 40, we did see an increase in the amount of nitrogen stored within the plants. So we're seeing better nitrogen content within those plants. 40 unit reduction, you see we took a hit on the amount of nitrogen in the plant with the reduction of 40 pounds. But you take a look, we don't have the numbers on there. We have a formatting issue when we transferred our slides for the purposes of today, but with the reduction of 40 units of N and utilization of Pivot Bioproven 40, we see that we had more nitrogen content per acre than we did with the full rate of nitrogen. So it is doing what it's supposed to do. The next thing we have to look at, though, is what is that giving us in terms of a return or in terms of yield? And that's where we, in our studies this year, this is where we, I forget how many locations this was. This 8 locations, I believe, Celena? We'll see here in a minute. But when we sum up the data and take a look at it, you can take a look at the first row there, and that's our standard N rate with no reductions and no pivot. We had 234.5 bushel corn yield, and our return was $1,190.34 an acre. When we reduced our N rate by 20 pounds, we see a drop in yield by almost 3 bushel, and we see a reduction in ROI as well. When you sum across all of our locations. When you reduce by 20 pounds and add pivot, we saw a slight increase in yield compared to just the 20 unit reduction alone, but we see that our ROI went way down because then we have to take into account the cost of the pivot, Proven 40. When we reduce by 40 units of N, we see a further reduction in yield and a further reduction in ROI when you sum all of our data. And then when we did the minus 40 plus the pivot, we again see a little bit of an improvement in our loss in yield compared to the straight 40. But again, our ROI continues to go down significantly with the cost of the ROI in the mix. When we break it out across our location, I guess it was 6 locations this year. When you take a look at this, a couple things stand out. One is we did not see a positive ROI improvement versus the reduction in nitrogen at any of our treatments except for Indiana at the minus 40 with the increase with the Pivot Bio in that treatment. You see that our reduction in ROI was lower when we added the Pivot at the minus 40 reduction than what it was with just a minus 40 reduction, if that makes sense. But in every other comparison we made, our ROI was lower when we added pivot into the mix.
Yes.
One thing to point out is Nebraska. Nebraska showed positive results in all treatments, even though the addition of pivot, we saw lower reductions compared to just the reduction in nitrogen. We think what's going on there is we came out of 2 years of pretty significant drought. So we've seen a slight accumulation in nitrate levels in the soil because we're not flushing them out like we would in Missouri or Kansas where we have more rain. And other thing to consider is that's irrigated. So we're at about a 250, 60 bushel yield level in that study. And we feel like we do gain a little bit of nitrogen through our irrigation water, through groundwater when we're feeding that. So that's why we see such a significant improvement in ROI when we reduce the nitrogen rate there.
It seems like the key here is to just pay attention to the numbers across the left to right, which one's higher.
Yep. And to take into big picture the fact that reducing nitrogen rate was better than additional cost of the product. Now, I don't want to leave here saying that the data is what the data is. And I think at some point, something like pivot or a product like that is going to end up being very beneficial for us in the future once we figure out how to manage it, because we are seeing the uptake in nitrogen increase, and that's very positive. So we are making an impact in our crops. We just have to figure out how to turn that into yield in dollars.
Yes, that makes sense.
All right, one more last biological study is a biological additive study that we used. And basically we did this for both corn and soybean. We'll start with corn here, but the two products we're going to focus on are Neovita 43 from ADM and NutriFuel, which is a meristem product. And what you have with Neovita is basically a sugar food source. We're just trying to stimulate biological activity in the root zone around the plants to help with uptake of nutrition. What we have with NutriFuel is it's a microbial package, and the purpose of that is to help make the nutrition in the soil more available. And so it's interesting to look at the data. Look at our corn treatments. You look at just the standard starter across the top, which was used in all these treatments. You see the levels of NPK, calcium, magnesium, zinc, manganese, and iron. But when you take a look at the starter plus 0.2 ounces of NutriFuel, you see we had an increase in those micronutrient levels in almost every one of them. One of the nutrients we look at. When you look at straight Neovita, we see a reduction. Now, I don't think by adding Neovita, we're causing a problem where we're not taking nutrition up, but we just didn't see the benefit in corn this year in our first year study to Neovita compared to what we saw with NutriFuel. When you combine NutriFuel and Neovita, again, we saw an increase, but we think the heavy lifting in corn is coming from the Neovita. And so, the NutriFuel. NutriFuel seems to be doing the heavy lifting in corn. So it's interesting. The goal of it was to make nutrition more available, more mobile, so the plants could reach it, and it appears to potentially be doing some of that. And if you think back to the other biologicals we were showing earlier and what they did in row count, just think the potential benefit of the plants having just a little more to work with due to a slight change in what we're adding to their root zone, plant zone. Shifting gears, this is the actual data for corn. You can see the yield and ROI numbers. The NutriFuel provided some fairly significant improvements in both yield and ROI. We also saw benefits from the Neovita, but just not near to the level of what we saw with the NutriFuel. Shifting gears to soybeans, it flip-flopped on us. The NutriFuel did not provide the benefit to soybeans that Neovita did. So you can see in this study, we saw a bushel and a half improvement in yield with Neovita and a $9.40 improvement in ROI with Neovita compared to what we had with NutriFuel. So again, once we summed them together at the bottom there, the expense comes up and it's harder to obtain an improvement in ROI, even though we saw a slight improvement in yield of about a bushel with the combo product. So some interesting things to look at on the biological realm. There's some neat products out there. I think when we think about what are the next steps, with any of these biologicals, especially the ones that are a bug in a jug, a living product, we have to make sure we're handling those products effectively to maximize their performance.
And the scientifically correct thing of a bug in a jug is critters, right? What you said
that's
earlier.
The word I use.
Yeah, that's the science.
A little redneck, right?
I thought I'd point that out.
I think from the summary of all of our studies, taking a look at those talc replacements makes a lot of sense in corn. All of them are providing in, whether we're looking at some of the 3-year products or even the first-year products, they're all showing positive returns for us, and they've been very consistent. So I think that's pretty interesting. The biologicals, though, overall are inconsistent. Some of them have worked really well. Some of them seem like they're doing some of the work that we want them to do, but we're just not seeing the total result improvement yet in those. So I think it's key to test them on your own farm. And my recommendation would be to don't go whole hog on some of these products, even the ones that we're showing positive results with. Take a look on your farm and see how they could incorporate into your operation and maybe make it fit.
So that kind of, I have a question then as it relates to this, and it kind of goes back to this part of possibly a theory and a bias I do have, but I'm just going to throw this out here. Is my question would be is how does all of this relate to the future of some of these new style soil testings where they're doing DNA mapping of soil and there's that potential, and how might that relate to the future on how we figure out which biologicals are better, and as new technology increases the strengths of them or their results? What do you think? I mean, do you think we're ever going to get to the point where we're actually prescribing my farm here needs this biological and this farm over here doesn't, and or where are we going to go with all this?
There's been prescriptive seed treatments have been going on, all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
I'm personally not aware of where we're at with all that stuff right now, but I mean,
it
maybe long after I'm retired and sitting back in my chair, but there will be a lot of high tech improvements made that allow us to be very prescriptive in the treatments, because it's not going to it's going to move away from being farming on an acre basis, but farming on a per plant or basis. And what can we do to enhance a plant? It's like with some of these new technologies with sprayers and fertilizers in furrow, shooting the dirt between the seeds. And, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity out here for new technologies to really make a huge improvement for us. That's good efficiencies.
Good point. And I keep going back to your analogy of, looking at the whole Midwest and all the weather pattern, and this didn't work, that didn't work this year, but don't take one year. I think about that. Maybe don't take one farm or one county or one state, or, just think about on this farm here, we need to start looking at what's more diagnostics.
What's really telling is if you took a field and you had your combine, you took a strip through and you weighed that strip, and then you go weigh the adjacent strip and it's the same hybrid.
Yes.
There's variability strip to strip, and that's the importance of having multi wraps of everything.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's important, especially with biologicals, to take baby steps, figure out which ones work well on your operation, but then also not in terms of just your management, but also help bring you some dollars.
Yes.
It's not about the yield, it's about the dollars.
Exactly. That's a good point. And anything, Celena, you would have to add into the...
Couldn't say better myself.
Awesome. Then we know we've hit it out of the park, Scott. All right. Let's wrap up biologicals. Thank you for watching.
If you want alerts on what we are finding in the field, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alert, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is our goal to bring you the most recent and advanced information possible. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also ask you that you give us a like and follow our channel wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch these videos. This ultimately helps us reach more people like you.
Hello?
Hey, this has been Wendell Cohen, your show host. Thank you to all who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.